Welcome, everybody, to Connecting the Universe. I'm author and researcher Mike Ricksecker, back at you out of the secret library of the Connected Universe. Well, we have a great episode up for you tonight. My good friend Trevor Grassi is with us to discuss all of this, talk and discussion that's been going on here lately about the second Sphinx. Is there really a second Sphinx on the Giza Plateau? What exactly are the stories, the theories? Because there actually are several. And it's really kind of blown up here just recently with Filippo Biondi and his podcast with Matt Bell, talking about this research that's being done there in a really, really interesting location. So we're going to get into all of those things this evening. And I just want to let those that are listening to the podcast version of this later, please join us every Wednesday night, 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time, connecteduniverseportal.com, or the public part of the show is out here on the YouTube channel, the Mike Ricksecker YouTube channel. So I do encourage you to join us there, but happy that you're listening to us as well. So without further ado, researcher and explorer Trevor Grassi is with me this evening. Trevor, I think you have covered every inch of that Giza Plateau, and we've had a number of conversations now. You've been out there a couple of days with us on the Stargates of Ancient Egypt tour. Always enjoy talking with you and picking your brains. So, we are going to be discussing Filippo's. Well, I mean, that's kind of how it's, because it's not Filippo's theory. It's Damiano Piras, this book, The Dawn of the New Sphinx. I do have the link down in the description for this particular book. But Filippo came out here on Matt Bill's podcast, of course, Khafre Project, all the scans of the Giza Plateau, and discussing about this idea about the second Sphinx. So, what can you tell us about it, the second Sphinx? Because you have these connections with Filippo. You're just on a podcast there with him. Talking about it. What's the second Sphinx?
Yeah. Well, we had actually planned on, I was doing an interview with Filippo and George Howard from the Cosmic Summit. Mm-hmm. That was planned long before, but it turned out it was scheduled at the moment when Filippo's other interview was premiering from Matt, another friend of all of ours. And he's had me on too before. He's been bringing in a lot of good stuff. But yeah, it's a new proposition of a second Sphinx. There have been many in the past. One of them I've covered before was the one that Dr. Reda Abdel Halim had brought forward in the Southern Cemetery. This one's out in the Western Cemetery, which is a little less explored in general. But I've been over that direction. Got some footage of it, so.
Yeah, we'll get into the footage that you've captured over there, because it's really, really fascinating. Yeah. So we'll get into all of this, but we'll start with, and we have, you have a slide presentation. There's some video here. We're going to be sharing a lot of things this evening. We'll kind of start with, some of the basics, because this is what Filippo shared on the Matt Bell podcast. And, honestly, I look at this and geometrically, it makes a lot of sense. This looks a lot like my 9th grade geometry class here, where opposite angles are equal, and when you had to do your theorems and all that, or had to do your proofs and using the different theorems. I mean, it looks, as far as the geometry is concerned, pretty legit, and the way it lines up astronomically as well.
Yeah, it's a pretty important line that's reflecting it over that central point between the two central pyramids. And this is Filippo's slide that he made, and it's loosely somewhat based on some of the ideas that Damiano is putting forward in his book. But Damiano's he listed out many different points that were all corroborating this general idea that was saying something significant was over there. And one of the main things is that line is actually the path of the sun zenith, the sun zenith passage on the summer solstice. And so this also ends up working with the equinoxes too, how the sun would rise over the Sphinx's shoulder on the edge of the pyramid, in the Great Sphinx's case with the Coffer Pyramid, but in this one with the Great Pyramid at the sunset. So, it's interesting too that line was very important to Gary Osborne, who's another friend, doing some great research on that. That's, I was just mentioning from the Rendlesham Code.
Right. Yeah,
Uh,
Rendlesham Dingo, which is it is, and I don't have that one linked down below, but I was telling you before the show, we had Jim Peniston on, fascinating things out of Rendlesham, and it was Gary and Jim that put that together. But
mhm.
yeah, so what's Gary telling us about these connections back to Rendlesham here?
Well, one of the coordinate points that was actually taken from the Rendlesham code is directly on that line, and it kind of pointed him towards the Sphinx from there through that same point that Filippo is mirroring the whole thing on, this directly between the two pyramids. So it's very significant to that. But it's also it's pointing us to the Azores as well, which is pretty.
Well, that's interesting because that's one of the ideas of possibilities of where Atlantis once was, or at least part
Yeah.
of that ancient civilization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I don't know. The stuff with Gary, it's so involved. It's so complex, but I just recorded with him a lot about it because we've been trying to record this stuff for a long time, actually. But it does relate, I think. And yeah, Damiano's theory, I think generally speaking, it makes a bit of sense. He's looking at it like a geometric puzzle, which is how you should be doing it, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because when you start talking about sacred geometry and things like that, you start to map things out like this, try to find what lines up. So, okay, there is a mound that's there right now, and you had pointed out in your presentation because you just went. What was it, the day before yesterday? It was on your YouTube channel. I do have it linked it down in the description. How that mound did not exist in 1929. I have seen some commentary about the possibilities that this is actually spoilage from excavations that have been there on the Giza Plateau.
Yeah. Well, that was something Manu Safe today shared with me. And yeah, it was in the 20s and 30s. There was a lot of Herman Junker and George Reisner and some other people were excavating all that area. So I shared the image from a book from 1929 that showed that. And there, you can't see the man there at that point because it hadn't been put there yet. But that doesn't invalidate the theory.
Yeah, but this is the mound today.
Correct? Yeah, and most of that was dumped there in the 20s and 30s. So it's a spoil pile, basically. It's excess material from those excavations. But if you look actually on the eastern end of it, you can see a structure there. Plus, the Great Sphinx itself was mostly subterranean, except the head. It's all subterranean.
Right. So yeah, because every time that they would have to dig it back out, was always the head. Because how many times did it get digged out over the millennia?
Well, actually, John West did a calculation on that back in his time, and he said that from Khafre's time, at least, it would have been buried 2/3 of its existing life from that point, because within 10 years, it'll automatically fill in with sand. So it has to be continuously.
Yeah, one of the issues that I understand that's happening with all the tourism that's going on there right now. Of course, they're keeping it cleared out, but it's having an effect with the weathering on the Sphinx, which actually being buried all of those times for all of those years was keeping it protected.
Yeah, I think that might actually be part of the original design because it protects the original precipitation-induced weathering patterns that Robert Schoch was analyzing.
Yeah,
so it might have been by design to be filled in and automatically protected and preserved.
That's a good point. Yeah, could have been.
And yeah, there's so many things that are today buried in sand. And I've made the point of saying, like, when you do see a spoil pile like that, you got to ask what's under it, because a lot of times it's intentional that they're covering something else up. So that's another important factor to consider here.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I guess Filippo was brought into this, and this is, from my understanding, a scan of that area. That's supposed to be the mound, correct? That's being scanned.
Yeah, and those anomalies are actually on that eastern end of it as well, which is right where you do see even a structure there from the book that was published in. That photograph was published in 1929, but I think it was taken more like 1910. Okay. And yeah, the area of it that was closest to the Great Pyramid is right on top of where you see those giant shafts Filippo's showing. So even if there's a Sphinx or not, we do have these SAR scans that are showing something giant right underneath it.
And, right, because these do look like, and my untrained eye, admittedly, those do look like the shafts that you'll pockmark this entire area. These are all shafts here, there, and that's a screen
Yeah.
capture from your presentation. But are those shafts?
Yeah, it looks like it. I mean, it looks like they've got some levels of horizontal connective chambers too, potentially. But I mean, these things are like 20 feet away from some of the shafts that I showed in the video yesterday, or whenever it was. And yeah, I think, my argument in the video was, and I also made the point that Damiano himself is not claiming there's a Sphinx there. Even no one is claiming there's definitely a Sphinx there. It's a theory he's proposing as a theory. And so he shared it to Filippo and had Filippo scan it. And Filippo found something pretty big right there. So, yeah, I think it's like if we cleared the entire mound away, we would probably find mostly flat ground as we see in this earlier photo. But towards that eastern end, there could be something that accesses into this stuff. And it's probably easier than removing that whole mound is just to clear the sand out of these 100 shafts I showed just within 100 meters of it, because these are all going down. We don't know. Some of the deepest ones I was seeing like very close to it where, they were all blocked up, maybe 20 feet down at the deepest. They were filled in with sand. So we don't know
Well,
how
you were
much.
saying that you were dropping a 100-foot line down there, and it was still going. So I
Yeah.
mean, these are pretty deep.
To be fair, I didn't drop 100-foot line down any of these ones that were specifically like within 100 meters of this, but I have done that to other ones. So, because Manu had given me some of these other documents that showed, like I say, from these Steindorf and Junker and George Reisner, when they were doing it, they did map out a lot of the depths and widths and basic sizes of these shafts, but they didn't give us imagery at the bottom of every single one. We don't know, and it's another point is that this was a century ago. They didn't have GPR. They couldn't scan from the bottoms. So to me, it's like, it's a no-brainer that we should at least just clear the sand out because that doesn't hurt anything. We can explore them. They're all explained as being these burial shafts, but why would you put 100 of them in a 100-square-foot area? They're really just packed in when you see it on the ground.
Right, and you got like two of them right on top of each other right there, so that doesn't make a lot of sense. I know you were talking before about ventilation or light shafts for underground passageways, and for me, I mean, something I keep looking around for the other underground cities. We find that in many locations around the world, these underground locations that were dug out, that were essentially cities. So is this part of that sort of thing, perhaps?
Yeah, were there even underground communities? To me, light and ventilation shafts makes the most sense. I was also in my film, I was making the point that I don't know, why would you build? I mean, these mastabas, when you look at them from above, these above ground structures, and the mastabas they look just like the pyramids. They're built with stones as big as the pyramids. They look like bases of, they could have been bases of rectangular pyramids almost, but they have flat tops. And every single one of them has a shaft in the top that's like 8 feet across, squared. And some of them with these interesting like groove cuts, like they were elevator shafts or guide or something. And then all the ones in between all of them, which is just a labyrinth of structures out there. In between, there's all these smaller ones that are more like 3 feet across, which are more like the ones I'm showing in the video. But yeah, that's my take on it. Is you have these three cemeteries, the eastern, western, and southern, and all three of them. I mean, the western is the biggest one, the one we're talking about now. But there's probably 300 or 400 shafts in the western cemetery alone, and probably 200 in the other two.
Yeah, you just look at that, and it's just all these little dots of shafts everywhere.
Yeah, and that's less than half of the western cemetery right there, too. The rest of it's closer to the pyramid. So yeah, that gives you the idea. It's Swiss cheese, like everyone says.
Right. Yeah. Now you've walked around a lot through there. I have not on that part of the Giza Plateau. So I mean, what's the feeling that you get while you're out there?
Well, it's getting trickier to walk around in those kinds of areas. Like sometimes they tell me not to go in there, but sometimes I've walked around and nobody cares. But it's kind of like, yeah, getting harder to just freely walk around the plateau in a lot of places right now. But I don't know, it's such a huge area that no one's explored. If you actually walk into any of those three cemeteries, you're seeing how much there is that nobody even recognizes is there. You know, most people come to the pyramids, they get 1 day there, 2 days on a tour or something. You're lucky if you can even walk from the Great Pyramid to Coffer Pyramid, much less Vancouver. You're very few people, unless, you know, I've been out on the plateau probably like 25 times now, where every time I try to go to new areas and see more, but I can't even begin. Last year, a few months ago, I was working on a project to try and document all these shafts, and like everyone's saying, you know, drop a camera on a string down them, and I have done that to some, but I mean, it's so
what
much.
do you find when you send the camera down?
Well, you can see these horizontal passages where they come off too. So this is one of the very, you know, some of the footage I got from these ones right next to the mound. There's one where you can very distinctly see a horizontal passage going straight to the mound in at the bottom, or at least where the sand level is now. So a lot of them have that, which is why I wanted to drop the 360-degree camera so you can look all directions as you're going down.
Yeah.
And I wanted to actually make a virtual entire model of the whole plateau and all those shafts as a photogrammetry model.
That'd be a lot of work considering the hundreds of shafts that are out there.
Yeah. But you could imagine if you could actually see that from underneath, go underneath, and then you see all the shafts coming down and all their horizontal connections coming out.
Yeah.
Well, that would be end game proof that there is, you know, these massive interconnected networks of tunnels underneath the whole thing, which, you know, all this evidence I've already had even before the Coffer Project came out was telling me that. You know, I was quite sure that there's a lot going on down there. I just want to really see what it really all is.
So do you think one of these tunnels, perhaps, I mean, if you're having these horizontal shafts coming off of the vertical ones, could one of these possibly be the entranceway into that large area that the scans from the Coffer Project have unveiled?
Any one of them could be, really. Any one of them, and we've got hundreds of shots at finding the one that is, you know, but you've really got the authorities locking down on this because, you know, the NC2 complex, I've been talking a lot about this, the cave in the northwest, which is actually visible from this mound. It's very close to this mound.
Okay.
So it's very possible the NC2 complex connects into it at some point in some way. But yeah, as we put a big expose out about that complex last year, me and Richard Gabriel, who's also very, very much into that specific site, they went back and sealed it up. It did have a gate on it until just recently. Now that it's not just a gate, they cemented it shut with stones.
Oh my gosh.
And this is in the wake of, you know, Armando and Filippo were talking to me. They said that that entire complex, it does continue on and it does connect down into this much deeper stuff under not only the Coffer Pyramid, which Andrew Collins was saying, you know, years ago that he thought it connected there with the one satellite image he had of that, and we agreed with him. But also they say it connects to the main core pyramid, and they say that if you go further west along this cliff, and I guess I haven't mentioned this publicly yet, but on one of my previous trips, I did come across what we could call NC3. So
really?
Even further west along that cliff, but they weren't happy that I was over in that area. And there weren't any signs saying don't walk over here, so it was not.
So you walked over, and they
not my fault, but I did
get
come across, because you can see them from Google Earth. You can see additional. They're like niches cut into the cliff with the door in them, and I'd seen more of them to the west, which. Yeah, the Coffer Project were telling me, not that they've released all the scans that show this yet, but they told me that other of those cliff entrances access some of the deep stuff. And I don't think we have enough time in 1 hour for me to discuss all the entrances that I think do access these things that everyone wants to see on camera, the stuff that the Coffer Project's showing under all three pyramids and the Sphinx. But we know of so many different entrances that very likely would access that stuff and that would only require sand removal to get in. So
Well,
I
which
don't
would
even
be
call that.
fantastic if it's just sand. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not even an excavation. It's just clearing sand or sand and trash a lot of times.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, yeah, that's kind of one of the sad things about the Giza Plateau. Unfortunately, there is a lot of trash there in addition to the sand. And yeah, just thinking about it now, the those scans from the Coffer Project was just over a year ago, because it was about a year ago that I had you on here to talk about those scans. And I know a lot of people have been asking, well, when are we going to get more? When are we going to get more? And I think it's one of those, we live in this very fast paced digital age, if I could get it out. And people, they want it now, they want it now, but this does take time. And there was, in addition to everything this time last year, a little bit later on, they were talking about more there around the Minkari pyramid.
Yeah, and it was funny actually, because I got Filippo and Armando to join my tour I just did. My first tour ever that I did with.
Yeah, congratulations.
It went so well, and it was amazing to have. We had Christopher Dunn with us, which is, I mean, I feel pretty awesome about having Chris Dunn on my first tour just alone, plus the Coffer Project. Filippo and Armando both presented actually on March 15th, the 1-year anniversary of their original press conference, which was not planned at all, but really perfect. And then he's been talking about, Filippo's been saying they should be wrapped up with it all by this summer. So
okay, good.
Interview he and I just did with George Howard from the Cosmic Summit. He said that he's planning on doing another press conference in Italy in June, I think June 21st. So yeah, I think that's going to be when he presents most of the complete picture, pretty much. I know he's still looking at a few different sites on the plateau, but last I had talked with him, he said much of what's going to be released by the end are horizontal connections that he's seeing on 3 or 4 different layers underneath that are connecting all the vertical stuff he's already showed. So that sounds very exciting.
That is exciting. So everybody, mark your calendars, June 21st or thereabouts, and you'll get some more of that information. But that's fantastic if he's finding the horizontal shafts to connect everything else, because I think that's what people are looking for, is because they want to know what's down there. Well, these vertical shafts connecting these things, most likely we were just talking about vertical shafts or the horizontal shafts a moment ago. I mean, one of those could be that entranceway. Now, of course, the question is, if you find that, will they let you in?
Well, excuse me. Another exciting thing on that is that, a lot of it, I don't want to say too much or jinx it, but there were some very positive, optimistic reinforcements I got on this past trip just in the last week. So I just got back like a week ago from this.
Yeah.
And yeah, at least there was one of my friends on the plateau who's involved in a lot of the excavations that happened there. He sounded like it's not impossible to clear the sand from what's called Campbell's tomb, the big one right behind the Sphinx, huge shaft going down. And this is the one Filippo's kind of had his sights set on, because it's one of the scans he showed where he's showing the shaft going down 1,200 meters, even though what we see of it is only, well, it's filled in with sand, maybe 5 or 7 meters down currently. But we know from Colonel Howard Weiss, who excavated it back in 1837, after Campbell had started excavating it, Howard Weiss took over with John Shea Paring and those guys. And we've got some images of that showing that it went down like 16, parts of it down to 22 meters. And then it hit this floor at that point that had a structure on it. So I've been saying it's clearly that there must be something through this floor, like it's a false floor essentially, and the shaft goes much deeper, because Filippo's scan shows it connecting to these levels at the 1 kilometer range, like 1,000 to 1,200 meters.
Right. So, well, and the scan of the Osiris shaft was showing it going, deeper than we currently know. And it's already, what we know, it's about 120 feet in, which is pretty deep. So when people start talking about, well, there aren't deep things. Yes, there are. There are a lot of deep things.
And
Yeah.
I finally got to the bottom of the other rumors I had been hearing about. There are levels below the third level of the Osiris shaft. And we went down to the
Mhm.
third level on the tour. I'd been in there a couple months ago too.
Yeah.
When I'd seen you, actually, I went on that trip also. And this is one of the things I still got to get out, but I actually filmed on the third level some things. I guess I'll just show it later rather
Okay.
than.
Yeah. Yeah. You don't have to divulge everything here.
Well,
People follow Trevor's YouTube channel. Again, links are down in the description. So yeah, follow
yeah,
Trevor.
I got into those tunnels there a bit, I'll say.
Okay.
And this is nothing that Mr. Beast didn't. Well, it is more than he did, but he was in there himself in that video he did on the plateau. But I had also dug up just a couple months ago this video footage from Boris Said from the 1990s and what was known as the Shore expeditions with Dr. Joseph Shore, who's part of the ARE, the Casey Foundation. And this is where there were actually some GPR scans that were done on the third level of the Osiris shaft. And they found an additional tunnel underneath there that was heading straight over to the Sphinx. This has never been known. It's never been shown. And so this documentary that Boris Said had done, he was the executive producer of Mystery of the Sphinx, the John West documentary.
Yes.
So he had kind of
what got me interested in all this is that one.
Yeah, it's the greatest film ever.
It really is. Yeah.
Yeah, obviously this is how I first got involved in all of this as well, was through John Anthony West, who's the best there ever was. Amazing researcher who really understood how to look at Egypt the right way. But Boris continued trying to do some of this stuff in the 90s, and he brought Thomas Dobecki back, who is the guy, the seismologist who had detected that chamber under the left paw earlier on. But that was with seismic refraction. It wasn't the same as GPR. He came back and did GPR on it also. But anyway, that's a long-winded way of saying that we have more proof that the Coffer Project is right, that there are additional chambers below the third level of the Osiris shaft.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know a lot of people. What I thought was great with Matt Bell's podcast is he was asking Filippo a lot of the different specific questions that people have had over the past year in regards to the scans. And Filippo, I thought, did a wonderful job toward the beginning of that interview explaining how the SAR technology works. And they got into the question of the water table, and you and I had covered that a bit the last time that I had you on here last year, and we were talking about the ancient Egyptians being masters of water diversion. Because you look at something like the Osiris shaft now, water floods into there, and it's not like the ancient Egyptians were down there chiseling away in the water. So they had to have done something there to divert that water, or maybe that was a part of the mechanism.
Yeah. A lot of times the water table is intended to be part of the construction. The construction is meant to go under it, and they proved that they did somehow build below it. When we look at the Osirion, we're talking at least 20 meters below the water table.
Yeah.
They built that thing. And the Osiris shaft as well.
Well, yeah, and that keeps going down. Even the traditional archaeologists that have been working on that site since the mid 1980s say that what we see with the Osirion is really just like the top level of a 5-story building that keeps going down. And how much water floods in there all the time?
Yeah, they could never lower the water in there. And even the Osiris shaft, it took everything they had to get the water level down to that one point where you saw the photos of Zahi in there. Back in the late 90s. That was all a result of the shore expeditions I was talking about with Boris and Dr. JJ and Desiree Hertak were there. They were the first ones to actually discover that sarcophagus on the third level of the Osiris shaft, because no one had been in there yet. And then once they found the lid of the sarcophagus, the information went back up the ladder, and very quickly they lost their access to be down there, and it was taken over. But Zahi's team managed to get the water down to underneath the top of the sarcophagus, or the box, at least temporarily. But we still don't know really what's under all the water, because the trench around that central island is very deep.
Right. Yeah, it's and all that continuous pumping, and you can't get it out because it just keeps coming in. It's mind-boggling. I do want to kind of swing it back around to this idea of the second Sphinx, because there are a lot of different theories that are out there as to what exactly it is, and it's really, it comes from the dream stele, where you have the two sphinxes on the dream stele, even though it's only in front of one sphinx. So I think this is where a lot of people get the idea, well, there must be a second somewhere. And you had a slide here during your presentation the other day showing these different proposed ideas of where a second sphinx might be. There are others that talk about it being on the other side of the Nile, or our good friend Mohammed talks about it's actually the Leo constellation up in the heavens, and the one there on the Giza Plateau was, in his belief, is it was originally a lioness looking up at Leo. So you had the masculine and feminine energies, but what on earth, one in the heavens, which is kind of an interesting concept. What's your take? And I'm not saying you have to say which theory you believe in, if you even believe in one, but what's your take? Do you think there really might be a second Sphinx out there somewhere?
Sure, theoretically, I think it makes sense. The dream steel image, the ancient symbol called the Aker symbol, Aker, that's like the symbol of the two sphinxes back to back, one pointing east, one pointing west. And there was a few different hypotheses about this. Dr. Rada saw the very weathered structure he thought looked just like a sphinx, and it is close to the proportions of the other sphinx, and it is facing
That
west.
was this one, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So
Which is kind of interesting. When you look at it from like this angle here, it does look like you're looking from the backside of another sphinx.
Yeah, that's the most convincing angle, actually. If you walk around the north side of it, it looks much less like one, but it could have been weathered down from one. The paws are kind of missing somewhat. They're only half there, but it could have been at one point. Right. So his theory is fair enough. I wouldn't say it's absolute. There's another theory that there's a sphinx basically flanking the inner road just north of the Great Sphinx, facing the same direction, east. That's another interesting idea. That's a site that Bill Brown and I have both paid a lot of attention to.
That would be that one there on the right.
Exactly. Yeah. And like you say, there's also been records, especially these Arabs in the 8th century or earlier, even we're talking about a sphinx that was facing west on the other side of the Nile. So that's a third one even before Damiano. So now we've got 4 main ones at Giza. There's also 5 if you include, I'd say Robert Bauval was probably one of the first people to mention that maybe the second one was purely just the celestial counterpart. It was actually Leo in the sky, which also makes sense. But he was also working off of John West's, John West had written the book, The Case for Astrology. And this was where you're seeing the lion, the Sphinx. It's, if you understand the concepts in John West's book there, and that these astrological ages were so important to preserving the knowledge. In the age of Taurus, everything was a bull. In the age of Aries, it was all a ram, Amun-Ra. And the priesthood would shift through whatever sign the sun was ruling through, which it would do for 2,000 years at a time, and then shift to the next. So if you recognize that concept, you realize there's no possible way they would ever build a massive lion statue except in the age of Leo, which is why John said, well, this thing's got to be either 10,500 BC or else 36,000 BC, because it would have to be a full cycle before if it was not the dawn of the age of Leo. And we've had a lot of people really building upon that concept further and further. Bauval bringing the Orion correlation that only aligned at 10,500 BC. And it's established as the dawn of the age of Leo because it's the Heliopo rising of Leo, or when the constellation rises with the sun on the equinox. So that only happens once every 26,000 years, which is why it would be a way of marking the time period when it was either originally built or it's saying something significant about that time. But in that case, it's also just rounding that out too, is that when it does line up to Leo, that's also the one moment when the 3 pyramids reflect the highest point in the sky of Orion, and the Milky Way reflects the Nile. So if you're looking up the Milky Way, it's just on the horizon, it turns into the Nile,
Right.
which is amazing, beautiful imagery.
Yeah, that really is. And I there was something I was going to ask in the middle of that, and I'll let you finish your thought while I lost mine.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay because you're the guest, so you're speaking. But yeah. Oh, I was going to say the ingenuity of the ancient Egyptians, and possibly even their pre-Diluvian predecessors, passing that knowledge on to keep track of all that for such long periods of time. You're talking, the precession of the equinox, the full cycle, 26,000 years, and then each cycle being another 2,000. To keep track of that is absolutely incredible. But like you were saying, you see the imagery, the iconography for each of those different cycles. Like you go to Karnak, and the sphinxes, they're all rams. So it's fascinating to see that dissemination of knowledge over vast periods of time.
Yeah. Well, it's very much woven into the whole philosophy. And if you don't understand that these zodiac signs do go back earlier, literally, than written language, as far as we can, if we're saying,
at least written language that we know of.
Yeah. When you consider that written language is only 5,000 years old, which I don't believe, but in that line of thinking, the signs of the zodiac go back even further. And this is part of what I was just talking to Gary about, because Gary Osborne, man, he's taken Baval's theory far beyond even, the Orion correlation theory. He's taken it to this other level where you're actually aligning the two sets of three satellite pyramids to Menkaure and the Great Pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
One of them, like the Great Pyramid's three satellites, they will align to the setting position of, let me make sure I'm saying this right. No, they align to the rising position of Orion's belt stars. When they hit the horizon, they'd be vertical if you're looking south. And then the ones by so the ones by the Great Pyramid align basically at the age of Aquarius, and the ones by Menkaure align at the age of Leo, which means the ones by Menkaure's pyramid have not aligned for 13,000 years.
Wow.
And yet the Giza Plateau is only 5,000 years old or less.
Yeah, supposedly. That's fascinating because, I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten about the satellite pyramids.
Yeah, well, they're just called
nobody really talks about
pyramids.
Yeah, right.
I've got an image from Gary where he makes these brilliant diagrams to explain it, but you can see that it lines up perfectly. Mm-hmm. You're seeing these two sets of satellites that align on the two extreme tilts of the sky. 13,000 years later, the other set aligns. So This is a clock showing you a 26,000 years clock, basically cycle, perfectly mapped out. And we're saying, they just came up with these pyramids 4,500 years ago.
Right. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. We'll have to get Gary on here one of these days and discuss all that. Yeah, he is an absolute wealth of knowledge. So yeah, I didn't know that he had taken it that far. But that's incredible.
Yeah, it lines up as well with Dr. Thomas Brophy's work on Nabta Playa, which is also incredible stuff. But yeah, this is our whole other avenues we could go down. Wayne Herschel, another friend, he's shown a lot more of these pyramids aligned up and down the Nile, like the 50 brightest stars north of the Milky Way. They're all pyramids. Yeah. Like Abu Rawash being Sirius, Abu Sir, I think, being the Pleiades, and he shows these maps where it's like, you look at it, you're like, that's obviously what they did.
That's fascinating. And there's so at Abu Sir you have the three pyramids there, but then you had just right down the road Abu Ghraib, which had on top of his pyramid the huge obelisk that was on top of there. And a lot of people believe that these things in some cases not only harnessing energy but being used for communication purposes. And I've seen elsewhere the idea and the concept that you have three like there at Abu Sir, basically projecting onto the one, which would be the tall obelisk there at Abu Ghraib. Yeah, I've seen that elsewhere in the world, so it's kind of interesting. But this is on like such a huge grand scale like that. So, but you were also, what was the site that you were just at here toward the end of your tour that nobody ever really talks about? I'm trying to remember the name of it.
Abu Sidum.
Abu Sidum. Yes.
Yeah, that's that. I would love to mention that quickly because it was really cool. I went with Angela Michael, who's she runs the Satellite Archaeology Foundation. She's been looking at a lot of the desert from just Google Images and stuff, but she'll use LiDAR maps and other satellite-based whatever's publicly available at least. But she's been looking at many different sites, and there's this one spot, Abu Sidum. It's spelled ABU space SIDHUM for people who want to look it up. It's in the western desert of Minya, which is Amarna, the kingdom of Akhenaten. So anytime we're in Minya, in Amarna, it gets very exciting because anything that's potentially anything could have something to do with Akhenaten or Nefertiti, which was, everyone's favorite dynasty there.
It is a favorite, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, Akhenaten was such a special pharaoh, so different from everyone else, and he put the capital of the country there, right between Upper and Lower Egypt, in an effort to unify the two sides of the country together. And other than his capital city being put there, Akhetaten, it was known as a city of Thoth or Hermopolis. It was a city of Thoth, Hermes, Jehuti. And so, of course, Thoth is the wisdom keeper. He's the scribe. He's the master of the mystery schools. So it's like if we find something around that area, it just could have something to do with the original oldest mystery schools on Earth, or Akhenaten himself, who was part of that anyway. So she's been looking at this one site for over 18 years.
Oh, wow.
And she's brought all this attention to it. She said, there are these structures in the desert that look pyramidal, and everyone considers them to be natural structures. But she thinks, based on many different points that she's bringing forward, not just like, oh, they look like pyramids, but she had substantial evidence to look deeper into it. So she's been very interested in this site for 18 years now. And this was the first time she got to go on site. She and I started working together last year, just talking about a few things and some other projects that we'll hopefully bring forward in the future. But she started mentioning that she wanted to go there, and we both kind of teamed up on it. And we just said, all right, let's just plan to be there on this day. I've got like 2 extra days there, and you bring everyone you know, I'll bring everyone I know. And we ended up having like a crew of like 11 people who all kind of met that morning over this beautiful breakfast, like, the table, how the real style. Amazing day. We went out there for the whole day, got 360 footage of all these structures up on top of them. And yeah, it's especially interesting because we know that actually Merlin Burroughs had been interested, and they had actually done some work there. The company that scanned,
the one that scanned Hawara. Okay, interesting.
The one that did the most recent scan of Hawara that everyone is really excited about now.
Yeah.
So we were trying to talk with Lewis about looking into these scans, or if we could get GPR scans done there. And yeah, I think there's something to be seen if we can get a glimpse under the ground there. That it seems like it's a pretty promising site, that something might be there. A couple other sites in Minya as well too. And yeah.
Well, yeah. And, and even, okay, you kind of qualified it that, not just because they look pyramidal in nature, but there's, some other evidence. Of course, it's, near Amarna and everything else. But you take a look at something, I understand it's different climate, or at least it certainly is now. But you look at places in South America and how those pyramids were buried under the jungle. You might have had like a peak of something popping out, or sometimes that wasn't even the case. It just looked like a giant mound, and you start excavating, and then also, oh, well, there's something there. Or you think about Göbekli Tepe. It was for forever. I mean, it's called Göbekli Tepe because it means pot-bellied hill, because that's what it looked like. And all of a sudden in the 60s, somebody sees, oh, I think there's something poking out there. And then in the 90s, Klaus Schmidt comes along and digs it up. Oh, yeah, there is something here. So, yeah,
Yeah.
just because, they're saying, oh, it's just natural. No, it might not
Yeah.
be.
Well, you make me want to mention one other thing quick too, actually, because
Sure.
I haven't talked about this at all. So I'd like to give you some fresh stuff
All right.
that is very exciting. Because so I went to Piedras Negras in Guatemala with Marco Vigato recently, just like a month before this trip, and it was kind of cramming it all in here. It was a really busy couple months, but I told Mark, I was like, if you ever go to Piedras Negras, I'm there with you. Let me know. I'll move mountains to make sure I'm there, because Marco's an awesome friend. He's done incredible work all in Mexico. I've got a video with him, the secret underworld of Mitla, which gets into all the work he did at Mitla in Oaxaca, where he uncovered the underworld of the Zapotec kings, just using
Wow.
GPR and using electrical resistivity and a few, remote sensing techniques. They found all the entrances to this legendary, what's, as far as Mexico is concerned, probably the most important underworld labyrinth type thing, aside from, maybe Teotihuacan itself. But yeah, he had incredible work he's done with INA, which is like the equivalent of the ministry basically in Mexico. He works very closely with them, and he's done a bunch of other projects in Mexico too. But Piedras Negras is, like you say, it's like out in the jungle. It's so far into this pristine rainforest, beautiful area. You got to take the boat hours up, and it's been very dangerous in the past. It's kind of been run by drug cartels and traffickers and stuff.
Yeah.
The river could be dangerous, especially even 10 years ago. But this is a site that Edgar Cayce said specifically has identical records to what's underneath the Sphinx in Giza.
Nice.
One of three, he said, and the third is somewhere on the bottom of the ocean. I have a theory that that's the city off the coast of Cuba.
Oh, yeah, that could be. Yeah, that's something I'd like to know more about, because that was revealed. I mean, what was it, like a good 15 years ago now? 10, 15 years ago? Nobody's gone down there yet. So that would be interesting. I need to note here that we have a pop up here. There we go. $20 super chat. Tom McNicholas, super chat superstar. He says, I'm fascinated about good mysteries. And actually, Tom, you do have a question above that we will get to. So Tom is one of our longtime members out here on the channel, good friend of mine. Laura's Edgar. Yeah, Edgar Cayce is
Laura's my friend too.
Laura's your friend. Nice.
Laura works at the Edgar Cayce Library. She's a really amazing researcher. Yeah, good to see Laura.
Fantastic. I was just asked to speak there for the Ancient Mysteries Conference in October. So that's going to be exciting. I've been wanting to get out there for a long time. So maybe I'll see Laura there.
Yeah, definitely. She's been helping so much with this. Actually, I'm going to share some amazing research that she helped me with soon. Thanks, Laura.
Thank you, Laura. Absolutely appreciate that. So real quickly though, we are getting down about the last 12 minutes of the show here. You did mention Milton Burrows. The name of that just sounds like
Merlin.
Yeah, exactly. So
like some wizard who burrows into the ground.
Right.
Yeah.
I always crack up when I hear the name. But Hawara, you've done a lot of work out there. You've been working with Lewis, and I know there's certain things you can't quite talk about, but we were out there just recently here in November, which was absolutely incredible. It was my first venture out there to Hawara and the Egyptian labyrinth. But what can you tell us? Anything that you can discuss with us about that? Because Filippo did mention that he is going to be working on some scans with the SAR technology out there at Hawara. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I just noticed over in that chat, Gary's here too. Gary Osborne's out there.
Oh, Gary's down there? All right. Oh, there he is.
Yeah.
Well, Gary, we haven't met yet, but I do absolutely love your work. So would love to get you on the show sometime and discuss it.
Yeah, definitely recommend that. So yeah, we went back to Hawara again, and actually this trip, I finally got to meet Louis Decordier for the first time in person. We've been friends for several years now, and been, in very close contact in the last couple of months as this stuff was coming together. And he was working on this document that, it was amazing. I was like, it was so incredible when he first shared this with me, and I saw how much work he's put into this. He is, of course, the one who put together the Mataha expedition in 2008. Mm-hmm. He was the one who first brought the team together, and not as an archaeologist. He's an artist. He's a really dedicated Belgian artist who just really cared about this, and he pulled it all together. He got Dr. Abbas and the NRAAG to go out there and do GPR scans on the labyrinth, and he showed us the first views of the actual labyrinth back then. So he's been someone I've been in touch with for a while now and really wanted to meet and connect with. But maybe just a couple months ago, we were talking about when can we get some version of this document that's ready to be released publicly, and make sure everyone whose name's on it and stuff was okay with it. And so he got me this public version just before I ended up going on the tour, and we put that up on the archaeologicalrescue.org. So that's our nonprofit foundation we've got now, and not Louis, but me and others. And we're
right. Yeah, I'll get that added. I don't have that in the description, but I will add that later so people can check that out.
Yeah, and basically this document, it's the most exciting thing because he and I both have been dreaming of this for many years, and it goes right back to the beginning. I got into Hawara as soon as I got into meeting John West and all the rest. So it's getting to that point where this is a dream actually coming true. And the Hawara mission for right now, he's got this new one started up. And yeah, the idea is to work on the water control. We're going to patch the canal up or pipe it through a pipe, or hopefully skip both those steps and just go straight to rerouting the whole canal around the site, and doing like a grass buffer zone in the north to deflect some of the other water that's coming in from that direction.
It's got to take a lot of money and resources to do something like that, because that canal's been in place for a long time. It is funneling a lot of water.
Yeah, it's true. It's been there a while. And what's really exciting is that he's got some funding for it. And we've got Athanatos on board that are ready to fund the first couple phases of it at least. And then we're doing fundraising to try and make sure it can continue after it just gets started. But that's amazing that they've stepped forward. And then he's got all the universities lined up too. We got the Grand Egyptian Museum lined up. We got the NRAAG, again, Dr. Abbas, who had done the first scans with him, the National Research Institute, Astronomy and Geophysics, brilliant, perfect. And then a couple UK universities involved as well, and Cairo University. So it's just
that's stacked. Fantastic. You have so many people coming together like that. Nice.
Yeah, and Louis.
And that's really what you need. Yeah.
There's no one better to be right at the center of it all than Louis. And he's been working so hard for this. So I'm absolutely thrilled about this one. Anyone who says these dreams don't come true, this one is happening right now. I mean, the project's already starting. Divers have already gone in. They've looked at some of the passages. And yeah, there's going to need to be some more divers, or, if we get the water moved, and it can just be explored dry, but there's still mud blocking some of the pyramid tunnels.
Yeah, I'm sure there's going to have to be a lot. When we were there in November, I mean, there was all that debris that was in there. So I'm sure a lot of that's going to have to be cleaned out. And, hopefully one of these years when we go back for my tour, or even your tour, that'll be accessible to us. That would be incredible.
Yeah. Definitely.
So Gary's got a nice comment down here for you.
Yeah, I just saw that. That's true.
So yeah, good. I'll read this off for the podcast listeners later. So Gary says, "Good job in describing the subsidiary pyramids in Orion, Trevor. I know how difficult it is trying to explain it without diagrams." Yeah, Gary, I didn't know he was really going to dive into all that tonight. So
I get excited when I start talking about Gary's work because it's on a whole other level. Gary's this is stuff that some of the stuff we recorded yesterday. We were talking about. I can't wait to share this stuff, Gary. It's going to be amazing because he's got the diagrams make it. It's true. You need to see how the arc of, the path of Orion is. It's in one time it's way over, and then the other time it's much shallower. Looking south, you really get a sense of this. But
That's
Gary's
incredible.
work,
That's an incredible connection there. Yeah.
yeah, it's all mathematics, and people can't, it's I've described it as undebunkable. Basically, you can't argue with math when you see some of these numbers that come out of the Rendlesham code, and so it's really exciting to get into.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to Gary's follow-up on the Rendlesham Enigma. So
yeah, the new book he's working on now is going to be fantastic for sure.
Yeah, I've got Kate reading the Rendlesham Enigma now, because we talked about it before the show, that she had spent time there several years when she was a girl, and she and her family both had some significant experiences during the time frame. And we're talking about, people really didn't know about it back. This would have been like late 80s, early 90s, something like that. So it's people have become more aware of it through the television shows and through Jim and some of the others who were there and had the experience. So, but back late 80s, early 90s, not so much. But yeah, Kate and her family experienced quite a few things there.
What is coming back to that, and it comes back around to Damiano and his theory about the second Sphinx as well, full circle, because it's like, one of the things I say, I don't know if he's right or wrong. I think it's a fair hypothesis, though, because he is looking at it as a geometric puzzle. Like I say, is really how you have to look at it. It's a puzzle of math, geometry, and physics, the stuff you see when you start looking at it in the right way. Like I say, the parts of the halls of records are there in plain sight. You just have to understand the architectural language it's encrypted into. And once you start understanding how the riddle works, then you just start solving it. And Gary's one of the OGs for that. But also my friend Ed Nightingale, he's got a book called the Giza Template, which is really great, with Laird Scranton also co-authoring that one. And so, I think other people like Damiano are starting to catch on to the language of how this knowledge was coded into the actual monument. So that's great. It's all Schwally.
It's all fascinating. It's truly fascinating. And now I'll put that one. Here we go. Yeah, when you start looking at the geometry that's just built into the plateau like that, like I said, this takes me back to 9th grade geometry class, but it makes sense when you start actually mapping it out like this. So I'm happy that people like Gary, Damiano, and others are making these sorts of connections. Absolutely. So we're about down to the end of the show. I know I saw at least one member question in here. Let me scroll back up, and it would be from Tom McNicholas, our super chat superstar for the evening. So he wants to know who makes the decision to block access to dig sites.
Oh, I think we all know that.
The guy in the hat.
I mean, well, okay, it depends. Of course, everyone knows Zahi is the main gatekeeper here, and the ministry council that decides whether or not you get the permit basically always goes with the same idea of if Zahi says no, the council is going to say no. Yeah. But this is all unofficial power that connects the two together. Sure. But in this case, I want to say I'm not blaming anyone. I'm not blaming the ministry. I'm not blaming Zahi for this specifically, about these specific shafts that I was showing yesterday, because I don't know of anyone who has proposed the project. I don't know of anyone who's really taken a proposition to the ministry and asked if they could remove the sand from these. And that's what we want to do with the Archaeological Rescue Foundation, get the money to fund something like that. Not that we would do it ourselves. We get professional teams to do it. But in this specific case, I don't know if anyone's actually blocking that. And I actually think that removing sand from some of these shafts is possible. A lot of the stuff is just off limits, I think, but there's a range of things. And I think clearing the sand from some of these shafts could happen. So if we get money to do the project, I think we could take it to them, and the ministry would probably approve projects like that, at least in some areas, in certain ones, Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I mean, from my understanding is that some of his power started to wane a bit because he's burned some bridges over there, and I
it
guess
is.
he wasn't invited to the opening ceremonies of the gym, and even
Some
then,
of them,
what's that?
some of them maybe. Yeah,
Yeah,
his power's waning.
yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, I mean, it's and that's what it takes sometimes, the changing of, and I don't wish any ill will over Zahin. I've always said this. He has done some remarkable work over the years, but you know, there is a bit of an ego there, and I get it because you know he's very proud of his work, but yeah.
yeah,
So
he has
hopefully,
blocking a lot of it if we're being real. But
mhm,
yeah, there's a lot that can be done, I think,
yeah.
at this
Oh,
point.
absolutely.
Yeah, ever since his Joe Rogan interview, it's
Well, yeah. just just buy my book, read in the book. It's like,
yeah, we're entering a new era in Egypt, and things
yeah,
are going to be very different once he retires. I can say that much at least.
yeah. I agree. I agree.
It's coming.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you for joining me this evening and discussing not only the second Sphinx and these different ideas and concepts, but so much that's going on there in the Giza Plateau and elsewhere. You have been doing a lot of incredible work out there, and I absolutely appreciate everything that you've been doing. So, thank you for taking your time and being with us this evening.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Mike. It was good to talk with you.
Yeah, always, always. And for those that are watching right now live, we are about to kick over to the after show. So I do have that link down in the description. It was great seeing everybody this evening. I saw Luli Tubi in the house, old friend there. Michelle, thank you for joining us this evening. And see Laura and Gary and everybody else that was down there in the chat, Tom and so many others. Really, really do appreciate it this evening. So Trevor, once again,
Yeah.
thank you so much. And
Yeah.
for everybody else, till next time, time really exists.